Take an elbow, add a little grease and perspiration, you've got yourself a classic. That's this week on Motoring 2001.
TSN's Motoring 2001 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
You know, this program, as well as TSN, is based out of Toronto, and I can hear everybody across the country now, oh, you Torontonians, you think the universe revolves around you. And you know, there is an element of truth to that. No, not that the universe revolves around Toronto, but that a lot of people in that city believe that. And that's why I think that the weekend loony has helped temper that attitude. You see, a lot of people, including those in Toronto, are now choosing to vacation in their own country, checking out the towns and cities like the one we're in this week of Saskatoon. And you know, I can still hear a few people in Toronto saying, Saskatoon, the weather's terrible out there. Well, it's spring and it's feeling pretty good. And yes, the winters are cold, but if you're a car buff and you like to collect old cars and refurbish them, this place is a gold mine. You see, they've got low humidity, and prior to around 1980, there hasn't been a grain of salt applied to any highways, which means the old jalopies are in great shape. Well, while we've been out here in Saskatoon, we've met some people who have taken advantage of the weather, and they're members of one of the oldest car clubs in this country.
The club is called the Draggins Rod and Custom Car Club. In 1957, 7 members got together and decided they wanted to do something to promote our hobby or motorsport in Saskatoon. The early days, we bought that chicken coop on a farm that was located north of Saskatoon. We converted it to our clubhouse and we began developing events. And one of the events we developed was drag racing on ice. And I remember Hot Rod magazine in 1962 making the quote under a photograph saying, got a heater in your rail?
The Draggins Car Club is unique in the fact that in the early 50s they started up. In the late 50s they went to a car show in Edmonton and said, we can do that. And they started putting on car shows. They made some money. They had a club member whose child needed some help with a disability. So they gave the money to at that time, the Council for Crippled Children and Adults. They've now given their money to the Saskatchewan Abilities Council. In the almost 40-some years that the car show has been on, they've donated almost $1 million. So that makes them worth talking about. And they have a great facility like this. They promote safe hot rodding, safe driving. These guys are great.
We meet here to enjoy the fellowship of building cars together. We also share a facility that you've seen around us where we actually build our cars that we display at the car show. It's also an opportunity for us to share our resources, because there are resources in this building that no single one of us could afford to buy on our own, but as a group we're able to put together on our own.
What really intrigued me about this car is how original it is. It still has the factory paper wrappers on the inside visors. It's still like new, and it really doesn't require any work. The powertrain on it, it's the Blue Flame 6, 140 horse, and it's a standard 6-cylinder. When I purchased it, it had 12,964 miles on it, and now it has about 14,400, and I've had it on 2 road trips to Lethbridge, Alberta, and to Swift Current, Saskatchewan. Other than that, I just use it for cruising around the city of Saskatoon.
It's easier for us to find more reliable older sheet metal than it is for folks in Ontario where there's a lot of salt on the highways. Here most of the vehicles around the 30s that farmers particularly couldn't no longer afford to use were just abandoned and left there. And finding them there, you'll see they're all in one piece. Most of it's all there unless they've been pulled apart or vandalized. And the rust hasn't had the same impact as it has, say, in Ontario or other places where it's wet and where it's humid with a lot of salt on the street. Hey, kid, you want to go for a pink slip?
Well, I have a 69 Plymouth Roadrunner. It came from the factory with 2 miles on it. My dad originally purchased it, and it's just been in the family ever since. It's survived all the rigors of Saskatchewan winters, being my mom's daily driver. It's just been a great car. It has a 382 with a 3-speed automatic with an 8 3/4 inch rear differential posi-track. We've got 97,000 original miles on it.
I always wanted a Maserati or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari mid-engine sports car, but who's got $250,000? So I bought a Corvair convertible and decided to build one. It's got a 1970 LT1 350, a 4-speed transmission, and a 355 rear end, and I'm just out having fun. 425 horsepower.
Hey, a nice signature you left on the road there.
Thank you. I hope it left my inscription so you knew it was me. Bottom line here is we like to think we've got the market cornered on fun. And that's what we like to do, is get together and have fun with our automobiles.
Are there any long-term love affairs on new car lots these days, or are all these just fodder for the recycling bin? That's coming up later on Kenzie's Corner.
You know, hop in behind the wheel of the Highlander, and aside from the slightly, God, it's been a long day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. This is it. Rolling.
Hop in, This is getting silly, man. Okay?
Yeah, still going.
You know, hop in behind the wheel. You know, the story of the 21st century so far has been all about trucks, and many of those offerings being sport utility vehicles. Of all the manufacturers, Toyota is perhaps the most prolific. They've already launched the Sequoia and the RAV4. This week on Test Drive, we take a look at their third new offering, the Highlander.
While Toyota's Highlander borrows very heavily from the highly respected Lexus RX 300, it is a very different vehicle. The look is more utilitarian, and the expanded dimensions, well, they bring significantly more room.
You know, Toyota really did have their thinking caps on when they designed the back end of this vehicle. There's a privacy cover to keep prying eyes off your goods, 38.5 cubic feet of storage space with the seats up. Now fold the split folding rear seats down and that number grows to 81 cubic feet. But that's not so much what impresses. Elsewhere there's cubby holes galore. There's bins on either side, extra pockets here. These two hooks, well, are ideal for grocery bags. Beneath the floor you get another sizable bin, and beneath this cover you get the real deal. A full-size tyre and a real wheel.
Suspended on McPherson struts at all four corners, the Highlander brings a good balance between ride comfort and agility. True, through the pylons the body does roll and understeer is never far away, but all things considered, the handling characteristics are better than expected. Part of the reason lies in the road-going 225/70 R16 tyres, and part lies in the vehicle's skid control system. By monitoring driver input and comparing that to vehicle behaviour, the system can right minor wrongs by applying one or more of the brakes and reducing engine output to steer the vehicle back onto the intended course. At the limit, you can feel the system working, but it never becomes overly intrusive.
As well as featuring an advanced anti-lock brake system, the Highlander also gets brake assist. Now this system recognises a panic stop by monitoring the speed with which you nail the brake pedal. Hit it fast enough and it automatically applies maximum braking pressure. That eliminates the need for the driver to build it up. Now while Toyota don't have any hard numbers, Mercedes-Benz, who use a very similar system, suggest it can shave 45% off the stopping distance. And you know, that's the difference between colliding with a car and looking at it from a safe distance.
The combined effects of the brake assist and 4 large discs bring short stopping distances that measure just 114 feet from 80k. Power comes from a couple of engines. Forget the 4 and take the sophisticated V6. Using variable valve timing and a tuned intake manifold produces a willing 220 horsepower and 222 pounds-feet of torque. Both numbers are more than up to the job of hauling the Highlander around with authority. The only transmission offered is a slick-shifting 4-speed automatic. Suffice to say, it's up to Toyota's usual standards. A full-time all-wheel drive system uses a viscous coupling to apportion the power, rounds out a very nice on-road powertrain. A low-range gear set is, however, notable by its absence, and so any serious off-roading is, I'm afraid, a no-no.
You know, hop in behind the wheel of the Highlander, and aside from the slightly elevated seating position, which does afford a great view down the road, you could be sitting in any world-class sedan. The seats are leather, heated and comfortable, power moonroof, power locks, windows, mirrors, cruise control, decent set of gauges, a JBL sound system that includes a CD player, and a great set of climate controls. Add that lot to sundry other things that you get in the limited package, and you've got a very well-rounded vehicle. The problem is, and it hits you like a left hook from George Foreman, is the $9,200 option package they charge for the limited version. Add that to the 36.1 and you've got a fairly expensive vehicle. That said, it's still not out of line with its immediate competition.
As with the current genre of utility vehicles, the Highlander comes with all the safety items expected. The long list counts dual front airbags, height-adjustable seat belts in all outboard positions, force limiters and pretensioners on the front belts, and a 3-point belt for the poor unfortunate relegated to the centre rear spot. You'll also find child-proof rear door locks and proper attachments for child seats.
You know, the lack of a low-range transfer case and these street-going tyres tell you that Toyota have elected to put this on the passenger car side of the line that separates this style of vehicle from a true SUV. Is that such a bad thing? Probably not, because fewer than 10% of these vehicles ever see any off-road duty. Factor in the dynamic stability control, a very nice all-wheel drive system, plenty of power and a luxurious interior, and you've got a very well-rounded package.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns parking your vehicle on a hill. Now, anytime you park your vehicle, you should solidly apply the emergency brake, make sure it's holding the vehicle, then shift into park, or if it's a standard transmission, put it into gear. But if you're parked on a grade or a steep hill, there's an extra line of defense that you need. Now, if this vehicle wanted to roll forward, here's the position you'd use. You'd crank the front tire sharply to the right so that the leading edge of the tire was right into the curb if it wants to roll this way. If it wants to roll backwards, you'd spin the steering the other way so the back of the tire was into the curb right here. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, what's the chances of the emergency brake failing and the car coming out of gear simultaneously? Probably slim to none, but here's an example of how it could go wrong. Freezing rain, and I found this out the hard way at my shop. If that vehicle's on a glazed, icy surface, it doesn't matter whether the emergency brake's on or whether it's in gear or not, it can still roll away if there's enough grade. Now, if you've got the tire turned sharply into the curb, like we have with this one, it's not going anywhere. That's your Midas tip of the week.
It's a 1938 Ford two-door Deluxe. Back in 1967, we were at the stock car track out on 8th Street, and they had a demolition derby that year, and this car that I'm doing was in the demolition derby at that time, and it had won the demolition race back in 67. Back in 84, I purchased the car to do up as a car. When I bought it for parts to fix up the other one that I bought, but I ended up using it instead. The engine is a Chevrolet 350 fuel-injected TPI engine with an overdrive automatic, and it's run by the computer. I like the style of the old cars and the modern technology of today's cars.
Would you ever sell it?
No. You put too many hours into it to enjoy it after you build it. And when you've wanted one for 25 years and you finally have it, you're going to enjoy it while you can.
You know, one of the nice things about the city of Saskatoon is that you don't have to have been born here to be immortalized. I mean, take Gordie Howe. He wasn't born here, went to school, played a little hockey, and for that they erected a beautiful sculpture in the downtown area. And how about John Diefenbaker? He wasn't born here either, but he went to university, went on to become Prime Minister, and for that they named the airport after him. He's got his own museum. In fact, John Diefenbaker's even buried here in Saskatoon. But you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be talking politics on this program, especially when we're about to head to the Quaker State Garage and join Bill Gardner.
Politics is out, Brad, but hockey, that's okay. Gordie Howe was my favorite player, and my dad's too. And I was out in Saskatchewan last week, and the Quaker State rep out there, Mike, ran me all over town. And I'll tell you, that is a hockey hotbed. All they were talking about in Regina was the Memorial Cup being in town. Mike was telling me about how many years he'd had his tickets and where all the players in the NHL had come from around Saskatchewan. It was really a neat experience. Anyhow, I've got an email to answer this week from one of our viewers. His name's Rogerio Furtado, and he asked the question, he says, when purchasing spark plugs for a tune-up, what's the best to buy? Is it best to buy stock, platinum tip, or iridium? I would like to know the best one to purchase is for durability and fuel efficiency. I enjoy the show, very informative, keeping up with the automotive industry. As a car guy, it's an excellent show. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you very much, and here's your answer. I wish you'd been a little bit more specific about the make and model of car you were talking about, because my answer would depend. But here's some general things that'll help you out. We checked out spark plugs, and I used my own vehicles to check this out several years ago, and we're still doing this on an ongoing basis. We checked split fire, AC Delco rapid fire, stock spark plugs, and also Bosch Platinum tip spark plugs. Now, the only one that I found that made a noticeable difference in the performance of the vehicle, certainly in terms of fuel economy, smoothness of idle, and throttle response, was the AC Delco rapid fire. I use them in my GM vehicles exclusively, and I find them to be really good. I couldn't really tell a whole lot of difference with split fires. Just ran the same as stock, no better, no worse. Now, with platinum tip spark plugs though, the big difference is their durability. Okay, now many new cars today come from the factory with platinum tip spark plugs, and those are the ones that advertise 160,000 kilometers between tune-ups. The electrode just doesn't erode as much from the spark. It lasts that much longer. And it also allows you the flexibility to have engines crammed into some pretty tight locations where the spark plugs are virtually inaccessible, thereby not having to service them as much. With 160,000 kilometer intervals, the engineers can kind of justify cramming them in there. Now, there's other reasons as well. Obviously, for emissions, you don't want that engine to be running rough or missing under load, or you've got a terrible emission control problem. So you've got to have spark plugs that are very durable. Now, for our reader, I think that he should check out what make and model of vehicle he's got. If AC Delco has a rapid fire fit, that's the one I'd probably be using. But if it's an application like some minivans with V6 engines where you can't get at the plugs, platinum tip, and what they call a double platinum, where the the center electrode and the ground electrode are both tipped with platinum, that's the way to go because that's your maximum durability. Now, any of these spark plug changes, if you're talking about a vehicle that's got bad spark plugs that are either fouled or worn to the point where the engine's misfiring, replacing them with any kind of a new set of spark plugs that gets the engine running smoothly and not missing under load is going to make a significant difference in fuel economy and emissions. It's going to improve on both fronts. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2001.
Look at all these beautiful brand new cars going out to shiny happy people all across the country. It's a wonderful thing. But did you ever wonder what's going to happen to all these cars 40 or 50 years from now? I mean, if you go to a collector car show today, you'll see things like a 55 Chevrolet Bel Air sedan in perfect shape. Beautiful car. Are any of the new cars today going to inspire that kind of emotion 50 years from now? Are you going to fall that much in love with today's Chevy Impala? I don't know. And another thing, how is anybody going to keep these things running 50 years from now? I mean, a guy like Bill Gardner, he could take a hammer and a screwdriver and probably keep an 1896 Benz running if he had to. But these cars, they've got more computing power than the Apollo 13 moon rocket. I mean, you don't fix these cars, you replace components. Is Bill Gardner's son going to be able to open up a microchip and scrape away at the silicon to fix these cars? I don't think so. What's more, every dealership in the country has hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of diagnostic equipment just to figure out what's going on inside these things. Now that equipment's going to be totally obsolete 50 years from now. What's going to happen to these cars? Who's going to be able to even know what's going on inside there? I don't know. Maybe the cars we're building today are destined to simply become museum pieces on display as disposable as paper cups. Well, I don't know. Personally, I've got my 77 Hornet. I'm set. It runs like a top. Bill Gardner, maybe all we have to do is to replace all the motors in these things with small block Chevys, and we'll be done with it. I'm Jim Kenton.
Before we go, we want to thank everybody at the Draggins Car Club out here in Saskatoon for their hospitality. And I have to tell you, we only had enough time this week to show you a few of their classic vehicles. We've got more coming your way, including a car built in Israel that actually beat Carroll Shelby when he was driving for Austin Healey. Shelby got so upset he went out and developed the Cobra just to come back and beat this particular car. We'll have that car and much more in a future program as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 2001 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.